There, there we go.
Well, hello, friends. Welcome to the 66th webinar on the Secret Doctrine. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheadings Mori Federation Webinars, then Webinar Series in Progress, as shown here. All episodes of this, the Secret Teachings of All Ages, and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar series you'd like to view. You can also access any of these webinars on the homepage of MoriFederation.com, right up here in the upper corner. This month in Old Diary Leaves, Colonel Olcott bemoans the unwarranted prejudice against the Theosophical Society among the English elite in India. Could we get a reader, please?
Sure, I'll start off. At the college in Bankapur, the next day, I had a very crowded audience, including several hundred students, the ones I most love to address. One of the professors, an English gentleman, was good enough to preside, and his boys were particularly enthusiastic. The principal, however, moved by an unreasoning prejudice, refused the hall for the second lecture, and the committee had to make other arrangements. If these narrow-minded men could only realize how they weaken their personal influence with the pupils by this futile attempt to do us harm, how, in fact, they largely increase their sympathy and their enjoyment of your discourses on the national literature and religion, surely they would not be so tactless as they usually are. Not one of them ever heard a Theosophical lecturer say one word that was opposed to good morals or that had the slightest tendency to make his or her healers worse than they are. Quite the contrary. Yet they go on nourishing hatred against us and vainly trying to belittle our strong influence in every way by word and action. Poor creatures, they might as well try to pull the stars out of the sky. While they are dreaming their impotent dreams of malice, the influence of Theosophy is traveling the whole earth like a thrill of electric force that might run around the planet. One has to come to India to realize how a whole community of European people can become steeped in besotted prejudice against it.
Thank you, BL. And another reader, please.
Okay, Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
Their own relatives at home throng Mrs. Besant's lectures, buy our books, take in our magazines, and join our branch societies. But these hold themselves aloof and use the name of our dear HPB as a word to curse by. More's the pity, for I am perfectly sure that it would only need the aid of some ardent society man, like the late Samuel Ward, or society woman, like some I know of in our European and American branches, to bring around 9/10 of the community. But then we public speakers should have to lecture to them, and such few of the higher class Hindus as they might choose to invite, or to confine our talks to their drawing rooms where no ordinary Hindu is welcomed. In a word, the colour line is drawn across the gateway of almost every Anglo-Indian bungalow, and our obliviousness to this fact is one of the strongest causes of our unpopularity. One could see when Mr. and Mrs. Sinnett and Mr. Hume were introducing us into Anglo-Indian society at Simla that there were no insuperable obstacles between them and ourselves, and that if we could run in their grooves, we might in time become quite friendly. But this we could never do, for that would mean almost cutting ourselves adrift from Hindu society. And so we must go on as hitherto, close to the hearts of the Indians and far away from the other community, our blood relations and nearest of kin in the flesh of this incarnation.
Thank you, Vivian. Excuse me. Thank you, Vivian. Okay. Last time we continued our study of globes, rounds, chains, and the transference of the life wave from HPB's interim chapter, A Few Early Theosophical Misconceptions, during which we learned that the first and most advanced of the 7 waves of monads, called the lunar pitris, recapitulates the experience of the lower kingdoms in nature before gradually reassuming the human form during the first 3 rounds of each chain. This recapitulation sets the tone for the 6 waves of monads that follow. We then learned that successive waves of monads individualize, but that the door into the human kingdom closes in the middle of the 4th round, as it did on our globe during Atlantean times. All those unable to move into the human kingdom must then wait for the next round. Those who do become human beings will gradually come into awareness of their higher principles over the final 3 globes of the 4th round. We then discussed the progress and phases of obscuration of Mars, Mercury, and Venus. We learned at the very end of the last webinar that vid footnote supra means consult a previous footnote, which we find a few pages back, and this brings us to where we left off. So this is the footnote in question. Could we get a reader, please?
Martha, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. If our moon is but a splash from our Earth, why can no similar inference be established for the moons of other planets? The astronomers do not know. Why should Venus and Mercury have no satellites? And by what, when they exist, were they formed? Because, we say, science has only one key, the key of matter, to open the mysteries of nature withal, while occult philosophy has 7 keys and explains that which science fails to see. Mercury and Venus have no satellites, but they had parents, just as this Earth had. Both are far older than the Earth, and before the latter reaches her 7th round, her mother moon will have dissolved into thin air. As the moons of other planets have or have not, as the case may be, since there are planets which have several moons, a mystery, again, which no Oedipus of astronomy has solved.
Thank you, Martha. Well, you can imagine how complicated it's gotten since then, right? When now we have some planets there where they found 100 moons. Okay, actually, no reason is directly given in this footnote for Venus and Mercury's lack of a moon, but we might infer that in both cases, their parent globes, which would normally be the globe D of the previous chain, which, like the Earth, becomes a moon in the succeeding chain, that globe D has dissolved, right? And that could also have to do with their sacredness, the fact that they're both sacred planets, both Venus and Mercury are sacred planets, and thus they don't have that previous globe D circling their current planet. The comment, Mars has 2 satellites to which he has no right, was reprinted in Esoteric Astrology, followed by a curious phrase, quote, astral and mental, AAB, suggesting what? That they are repositories for astral and mental permanent atoms of Mars? They're obviously not composed of astral and mental matter. At any rate, the comment, Mars has two satellites to which he has no right, suggests that neither moon is the globe D from the previous Mars chain. Next, both Mars and Mercury are septenary change, as independent of the Earth's sidereal lords and superiors as you are independent of the principles of Domling, Tom Thumb, which were perhaps his 6 brothers with or without nightcaps. Okay, putting this in context, we need to remember that this letter was written to correct the misconception that Mars and Mercury are somehow 2 globes in the Earth chain. The reference to Tom Thumb is curious, probably used because Tom's 6 night-capped brothers could represent the 6 sleeping globes in a round, with Tom representing the dense physical 7th globe. By the way, Tom Thumb was said to really have existed, a little guy. Here's his supposed tomb. We don't really know if he exists or not because he died at age 101 in 1620. So that's interesting. I'll reread the last paragraph of this letter on the distinction between knowledge and wisdom. Gratification of curiosity is the end of knowledge for some men, was said by Bacon, who was as right in postulating this truism as those who were familiar with it before him were right in hedging off wisdom from knowledge and tracing limits to that which is to be given out at one time. Remember, knowledge dwells in heads replete with thoughts of other men, wisdom in minds attentive to their own. You can never impress it too profoundly on the minds of those to whom you impart some of the esoteric teachings. Okay. By the way, anytime you have any questions or comments, just raise your hand and we'll get to you. All right, next up, can we get a reader, please? We're still looking at the excerpt for that from that letter, probably from Dual Cool.
Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Did you say Karen?
Yes, please.
Okay. Our globe, as taught from the first, is at the bottom of the arc of descent, where the matter of our perceptions exhibits itself in its grossest form. Hence, it only stands to reason that the globes which overshadow our Earth must be on different and superior planes. In short, as globes, they are in coadunition, but not in consubstantiality with our Earth, and thus pertain to quite another state of consciousness. Our planet, like all those we see, is adapted to the particular state of its human stock, that state which enables us to see with our naked eye the sidereal bodies, which are coessential with our terrene plane and substance, just as their respective inhabitants, the Jovian Martians, and others can perceive our little world, because our planes of consciousness, differing as they do in degree, but being the same in kind, are on the same layer of differentiated matter. What I wrote was the minor pralaya concerns only our little strings of globes. We called change strings in those days. To such a string our Earth belongs. This ought to have shown plainly that the other planets were also strings or chains. If he, meaning the objector, would perceive even the dim silhouette of one of such planets on the higher planes, he has to first throw off even the thin clouds of the astral matter that stands between him and the next plane.
Okay, thank you. All right. So first of all, coordination means, or coadunition means in mutual regard and of equal importance. Not in consubstantiality means not of the same substance. The statement, our planet, like all those we see, is adapted to the peculiar state of its human stock, suggests that the tenuity of a globe is based on the consciousness of the human kingdom that will be incarnating on that globe, and not the reverse, wherein the human kingdom must adapt to the environment in which it finds itself. Next, another excerpt, probably from the Master Kuthumi. Could we get a reader, please?
Tia, can you read that for us, please?
It becomes patent why we could not perceive, even with the help of the best earthly telescopes, that which is outside our world of matter. Those alone whom we call adepts, who know how to direct their mental vision and to transfer their consciousness, physical and psychic both, to other planes of being, are subject to speak with authority on such subjects, are able to speak with authority on such subjects. And they tell us plainly, lead the life necessary for the acquisition of such knowledge and powers, and wisdom will come to you naturally. Whenever you are able to attune your consciousness to any of the 7 chords of universal consciousness, those chords that run along the sounding board of cosmos, vibrating from one eternity to another. When you have studied thoroughly the music of the spheres, then only will you become quite free to share your knowledge with those with whom it is safe to do so. Meanwhile, be prudent. Do not give out the great truths that are the inheritance of the future races to our present generation. Do not attempt to unveil the secret of being and non-being to those unable to see the hidden meaning of Apollo's heptachord, the lyre of the radiant God, in each of the 7 strings of which dwelleth the spirit, soul, and astral body of the cosmos, whose shell only has now fallen into the hands of modern science. Be prudent, we say, prudent and wise, and above all take care what those who learn from you believe in, lest by deceiving themselves they deceive others. For such is the fate of every truth with which men are as yet unfamiliar. Let rather the planetary chains and the other super and subcosmic mysteries remain a dreamland for those who can neither see nor yet believe that others can.
Thank you, Tia. Okay, first up, those alone, I'll be skipping parts of these letters. I'm just commenting on certain sections. Those alone whom we call adepts, who know how to direct their mental vision and how to transfer their consciousness, physical and psychic both, to other planes of being, are able to speak with authority on such subjects. DK calls mental vision higher clairvoyance, and in A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, he gives this example of its use. Could we get a reader?
Janet, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Transmutation is the work of transferring the life from one stage of atomic existence to another, and it involves 3 distinct steps, which can be seen and traced by means of higher clairvoyance and from the higher planes.
Thank you. Next up, whenever you are able to tune your consciousness to any of the 7 chords of universal consciousness, those chords that run along the sounding board of cosmos, vibrating from one eternity to another. Okay, the 7 chords, which in Greek mythology are associated with the lyre of Apollo and Orpheus, are both the means by which universal consciousness manifests, as well as containing the 7-fold noumenal potencies of that existence. Could we get a reader, please?
Cindy, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, there are 4 veils of Maya, constructed necessarily of 7 forces, and these produce the factual and phenomenal aspect in time and space of the great illusion in its three forms of illusion, glamour, and Maya. There are 7 points of energy through which different aspects of the force needed to produce the desired effects within the veils of Maya can flow, and these correspond to the 7 ray types of qualities.
Thank you. Next up. When you have studied thoroughly the music of the spheres, then only will you become quite free to share your knowledge with those with whom it is safe to do so. So the music of the spheres is related to the voice of the silence on the Buddhic plane and the beatitudes on the Atmic. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Robert, can you read that, please?
The sound, which was the first indication of the activity of the planetary logos, is not a word, but a full reverberating sound, holding within itself all other sounds, all chords, and certain musical tones which have been given the name of the music of the spheres and dissonances, unknown as yet to the modern ear. It is this sound which the rising one must learn to recognize and to which he must respond, not only by means of the sense of hearing and its higher correspondences, but through a response from every part and aspect of the form nature in the three worlds.
Thanks, Robert. Next, Apollo's heptachord, the lyre of the radiant god, in each of the 7 strings of which dwelleth the spirit, soul, and astral body of the cosmos. Curtis is the key to the universe, gives us more info. A reader, please.
Maria, can you read that for us, please?
We find a similar idea expressed in the Greek legend of the 7 stringed lyres given to Orpheus by Apollo, his father. Apollo being the god of the sun or of spiritual light, and the lyre representing the 7 creative nature notes or the 7 color rays emanating from the 7 planets, while Orpheus typified the animating principle or the 3 Christ force, which alone can draw divine harmony from the forces of nature. These notes represent lines or force emanating from the sun, one of which is picked out, focused, and concentrated by which of the 7 planets and again sent forth. It is because of these rays of force acting upon the 7 sacred centers in the man, which corresponds to the planets, that the planetary forces affect man. Hence, man can sweep the strings of his golden harp in harmony only as he correlates with the sun force, the Christ within, and can listen, understand, and respond to the 7 mystic notes only as he builds into his life the planetary forces and rules them.
Thank you. Okay, next up. Reader, please.
Tom, I don't see you unmuting. Trudy, can you read that for us, please?
It is to be regretted, can you hear me?
Yes.
That few of us have followed the wise advice and that many a priceless pearl, many a jewel of wisdom has been cast to the enemy, unable to understand its value, and who has turned round and rent us. Let up image, wrote them same master to his 2 lay chelas, as he called the author of esoteric Buddhism, and another gentleman, his co-student for some time. Let us imagine that our Earth is one of a group of 7 planets or man-bearing worlds. The 7 planets are the sacred planets of antiquity and are all septenary. Now the life impulse reaches A, or rather which is destined to become A, and which so far is but cosmic dust, in brackets, a layer center, etc. In these early letters, in which the term had to be invented and words coined, the rings very often became rounds, and the rounds life cycles, and vice versa. To a correspondent who called a round a world ring, the teacher wrote, "I believe this will lead to a further confusion. A round we are agreed to call the passage of a monad from globe A to globe G or Z. The word ring is correct. Advise, Mr. Strongly to agree upon a nomenclature before going any further."
Okay, so we can see in this letter from the same master, probably Kudhumi, the early stages of codifying theosophical doctrine. But since we've already covered the ideas given here, let's continue. Could we get a reader, please?
Kira, can you read that for us, please?
Notwithstanding this agreement, many mistakes, owing to this confusion, crept into the earliest teachings. The races even were occasionally mixed up with the rounds and rings and led to similar mistakes in man. From the first master had written, "Not being permitted to give you the whole truth or divulge the number of isolated fractions, I am unable to satisfy you. This in answer to the questions. If we are right, and then the total existence prior to the man period is 637, etc., etc. To all the queries relating to figures, the reply was, try to solve the problem of 777 incarnations. So I am obliged to withhold information. Yet, if you should work out the problem by yourself, it will be my duty to tell you so. But they never were so worked out, and the results were never ceasing perplexity and mistakes."
Okay, the main thrust of this passage, which comes from a dialogue between a student and the Master Kudhumi found in the Mahatma letters to AP Senate, revolves around the number of incarnations taken by a human being on a single globe. I've edited this quote for clarity. Could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. Student, so run around with 7 races and 7 sub-races with a life in each equals 13 times 7 times 7, which equals 637 lives. Please set us right here, stating the normal number of lives. Kudhumi. On each planet, our Earth included, a man has to perform 7 rounds through 7 races, 1 in each, and 7 times 7 shoots. There's 7 root races and 7 sub-races or offshoots. What I call race, you would perhaps term stock. Though sub-race expresses better what we mean than the word family or division of the genus Homo. However, to set you right, so far I will say 1 life in each of the 7 root races, 7 lives in each of the 49 subraces, or 7 times 7 times 7 equals 343, and add 7 more. And then a series of lives in offshoot and branchlet races, making the total incarnations of man in each station or planet 777.
Okay, thank you. So of particular importance here is the final number, 777. The Master Kuthumi seems to suggest that this is the literal number of total incarnations on each globe. But I can't help but think that this is a blind, and that 777 is actually a subjective number representing the process that is undergone through the medium of incarnation. In a treatise on cosmic fire, we learned that 777 is also the number associated with Sanat Kumara. There's one school of thought that puts 700 lives, again symbolically, in the halls of ignorance, 70 lives in the halls of learning, and 7 final lives in the halls of wisdom. But again, they're abstractions, they're symbolic of the actual number of lives. Then you have to ask yourself too, does everybody have the same number of lives? It seems to me that, that there are those who move more quickly than others and therefore would have less lives. But it's still, it's interesting, mostly for those interested in the history of Theosophy and how it was being developed, because this was really the very earliest period for the development of Theosophy, and you see it kind of coming into form in these letters. To better understand this next passage, keep in mind that the term vidya is Sanskrit for occult science, or even more broadly, spiritual wisdom. HBB states in her collected writings, volume 11, the meaning of the word vidya can only be rendered by the Greek term gnosis, the knowledge of hidden and spiritual things, or again, the knowledge of Brahma, that is to say, of the God that contains all the gods. So with this in mind, let's read this passage. Please, can we get a reader, please?
Okay, Tom, can you read that for us, please? No, I'm still not getting him unmuting. Okay, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Of the 4 vidyas out of the 7 branches of knowledge mentioned in the Puranas, namely Jnana Vidya, the performance of religious rites in order to produce certain results, Maha Vidya, the great magic knowledge, now degenerated into Tantrika worship, Guhya Vidya, the science of mantras and their true rhythm or chanting, of mystical incantations, etc. It is only the last one, Atma Vidya, or the true spiritual and divine wisdom, which can throw absolute and final light upon the teachings of the first 3 named. Without the help of Atma Vidya, the other 3 remain no better than surface sciences, geometrical magnitudes having length and breadth, but no thickness. They are like the soul, limbs, and mind of a sleeping man, capable of mechanical motions, of chaotic dreams, and even sleepwalking, of producing visible effects, stimulated by instinctual, not intellectual causes, least of all by fully conscious spiritual impulses. A good deal can be given out and explained from the first 3 named sciences, but unless the key to their teaching is furnished by Atma Vidya, they will remain forever like the fragments of a mangled textbook, like the adumbrations of great truths, dimly perceived by the most spiritual, but distorted out of all proportion by those who would nail every shadow to the wall.
It says vintage HPB. She's at her best when she's putting something down. An adumbration is a shadow or faint outline. So one might make the same observation put forth here, that without the key form, other related forms become meaningless, about Raja Yoga in comparison to Hatha, Laya, and Bhakti, and Jnana Yoga. This is because, like Raja Yoga, Atma Vidya leads to knowledge of one's true self, and is thus the highest form of spiritual wisdom. There are other Vidyas, like Ashtar Vidya, called in the West Vril, which bestows the knowledge of vibratory force. Vivan Vidya, which bestows techniques for flying, etc. Vidyas can also be personifications, like the 10 Mahavidyas, which include the goddesses Kali, Tara, and Bhairavi, thus affirming the fact that the gods are personified nexus of particular energies.
Francis?
Okay, yeah.
Sorry. Tia said, could the 777 also be symbolic of what 7 represents numerologically in the 3 aspects of being, attaining a measure of perfection in the 3 aspects of being?
Yeah, each of our 3 aspects of being could be seen as sevenfold. There's so many meanings to it. 7 times 7 times 7 is 343, which is the number of subplanes in the entire series of planes, universal planes and cosmic physical plane. It also refers to, on any given plane, you have the 3 lower, the 3 higher, and the 4th in the middle. And this decade specifically represents, as an example of the importance of numerology, there are 343 root races in a chain. And so it's which is again 7 times 7 times 7. So there's lots of meaning to it. I think it's it suggests the entire manifested whole is one of its meaning. The entirety of manifestation, it could be described as well. Thanks for that, Tia. Anybody else? Thoughts about anything? We've gone through, some material that was more, and we still are, more relevant to the period in which he was writing, like trying to reconcile the some errors brought out in esoteric Buddhism, for instance. But we're just about to get back on track and move on to some hardcore information about the rounds and chains and the life waves, etc. So just hang in there. Could we get a reader for this, please? Oh, by the way, this, hang on a sec. So we just had this. Sorry, I gotta catch up here. Okay, yeah. Next, we come to the second of 2 inserted sections. This one entitled Additional Facts and Explanations Concerning the Globes and the Monads. Could we get a reader for this, please?
Charlie, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. 2 additional facts and explanations concerning the globes and the monads. 2 statements are made in esoteric Buddhism, must be noticed, and the author's opinions quoted. On page 47, the 5th edition, it is said, the spiritual monads do not fully complete their mineral existence on globe A. Globe A, I lost myself here. Oh, then completed on globe B, and so on. They pass several times around the whole circle of minerals, and then again several times round all vegetables, and several times as animals. We purposely refrain for the present from going into figures, etc., etc. This was a wise course to adopt in view of the great secrecy maintained with regard to figures and numbers. Reticence is now particularly requested,
Partially relinquished.
but it would be perhaps have been better had the real numbers concerning rounds and evolutionary gyrations been either entirely divulged at the time or as entirely withheld. Mr. Sennett understood this difficulty well when saying, page 440, that for reasons which are not easy for the outsider to divine, the possessors of occult knowledge are especially reluctant to give out facts relating to cosmology. Through it is hard for the initiated to understand why there should be withheld.
So you can see, it's almost like growth pains, to bring forth the final theosophical doctrine that was going on at this time. We'll just consider this one passage. The spiritual monads do not fully complete their mineral existence on globe A, then complete it on globe B, and so on. They pass several times round the whole circle as minerals, and then again several times round as vegetables, and several times as animals. So we might assume that by the phrase several times round the whole circle, Sennett is referring to the rounds of a chain. The idea that it takes several rounds, which is the passing of the life wave through 7 globes, for a monad to advance from the mineral to the vegetable to the animal kingdoms, is in keeping with DK's teaching. This next paragraph continues developing the idea that the figures belonging to the occult calculations cannot be given out. The next statement of note is, quote, the evolution of the globes and that of the monads are closely interblended. This reminds us that the human and Deva kingdoms in large part determine the growth and consciousness of the globe that we inhabit. In a related statement, DK says, as mankind completes one unification after another, the heavenly men on intuitional levels and on spiritual levels are completed. Again, suggesting humanity stands in a causal position to the globes he inhabits. And finally, we have the statement, Eastern philosophy rejects the Western theological dogma of a newly created soul for every baby born, as being as unphilosophical as it is impossible in the economy of nature. The idea of one soul sending one personality expression through one incarnation, as expressed in the Creed of Nicene, was adopted by the early church fathers expressly to reject the idea of reincarnation, which, by the way, had appeared in some of the early Christian writings. I think it was to gather and centralize power in the church. So, you only have this one shot. So you have to do what the church tells you so that you get it right, This whole idea, in my humble opinion, is as puerile as it is unphilosophical. So any thoughts or questions, you just let me know. Let's continue. Can we get a reader, please?
There must be a limited number of monads evolving and growing more and more perfect through their assimilation of many successive personalities in every new Manvantara. This is absolutely necessary in view of the doctrines of rebirth, karma, and the gradual return of the human monad to its source, absolute deity. Thus, although the hosts of more or less progressed monads are almost incalculable, they are still finite, as is everything in this universe of differentiation and finiteness. As shown in the double diagram of the human principles in the ascending globes of the world chains, there is an eternal concatenation of causes and effects, and a perfect analogy which runs through and links together all the lines of evolution. One begets the other, globes as personalities, but let us begin at the beginning. The general outline of the process by which the successive planetary chains are formed has just been given. To prevent future misconceptions, some further details may be offered, which will also throw light on the history of humanity on our own chain, the progeny of that of the moon.
Okay, so it looks like HPB is finding her footing again here, beginning with this. So first up, there must be a limited number of monads evolving and growing more and more perfect through their assimilation of many successive personalities in every new Manvantara. DK gives the total number of human monads associated with the Earth scheme at 60 billion. These monads all pass through the human kingdom at different times and thus at different rates of progression as our scheme unfolds. Next, this is absolutely necessary in view of the doctrine of rebirth, karma, and the gradual return of the human monads to its source, absolute deity. At the sixth initiation, the great pilgrimage into the lesser kingdoms is completed, and the indwelling jiva, the prodigal son, returns to his father's home and on the monadic plane, and thus to full consciousness. Next, as shown in the double diagram of the human principles and the ascending globes of the world chains, there is an eternal concatenation of causes and effects, and a perfect analogy which runs through and links together all the lines of evolution. One begets the other, globes as personalities. But let us begin at the beginning. So here's the cited and now familiar to us chart. The eternal concatenation of causes and effects refers to the fact that involution and evolution through both our human principles and the globes is driven by the growth through interaction of each kingdom with the one both beneath and above it. The perfect analogy refers to the principle of as above and so below, the one law that governs how all lines of evolution unfold. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Vivian, can you read that for us, please?
In the diagrams on page 172, figure 1, represents the lunar chain of 7 planets at the outset of its 7th or last round, while figure 2 represents the Earth chain, which will be but is not yet in existence. The 7 globes of each chain are distinguished in their cyclic order by the letters A to G, the globes of the Earth chain being further marked by a cross, plus sign, the symbol of the Earth. Now, it must be remembered that the monads cycling round any septenary chain are divided into 7 classes or hierarchies according to their respective stages of evolution, consciousness, and merit. Let us follow then the order of their appearance on planet A in the first round. The time spaces between the appearances of these hierarchies on any one globe are so adjusted that when class 7, the last, appears on globe A, class 1, the first, has just passed on to globe B, and so on, step by step, all round the chain.
Okay, so she's really getting down to business here. First, we have a description of the chart that appears on the following page, which HPB tells us represents the lunar chain of 7 planets at the outset of its 7th or last round. Because the Earth chain shown at left is not yet in existence, its various globes are drawn with dots and dashes. Also, what looks like a plus sign after each letter is actually a cross, symbol of the Earth. Next, now it must be remembered that the monads cycling around any septenary chain are divided into 7 classes or hierarchies according to the respective stages of evolution, consciousness, and merit. So here are the 7 hierarchies who are active in this second solar system, which form the 7 classes of monads. And you can see the enormous range represented here, and which range from the divine flames down to the elemental lives. The lowest 4 of these hierarchies contain the spirit, soul, and substance of the human kingdom. Next, let us follow then the order of their appearance on planet A in the first round. The time spaces between the appearances of these hierarchies on any one globe are so adjusted that when class 7, we're talking about monadic classes or hierarchical levels, the last appears on globe A, class 1, the first, has just passed on to globe B, and so on, step by step, all round the chain. So the highest or first hierarchy passes on to globe B of a chain just before or just as the life wave of the lowest or 7th hierarchy transfers from the previous chain onto the globe A of the new chain. This pattern continues round the chain of globes. Thus, just after the first class passes to globe C, the 7th class passes on to globe B, etc. It's actually less complicated than it sounds. You just have there's this constant movement onto the globes, and any one globe is inhabited by all 7 life waves, except for that when the first wave passes to the next globe, the last waits until that that has gone entirely through that globe before it can pass on to that globe. So it's one of those things that's easier to visualize than it is to put in words. But if you have any thoughts or questions, we'll try to sort it out. It's an important aspect of this concept of globes, the transference of the life waves from one globe to the next. I saw Robert's hand go up there.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
Okay, thank you. I sometimes get a little confused about the terms of, talking about the monad cycling through the different globes and the mineral monad, the mineral monad, the vegetable, animal, human, et cetera, isn't it the same monad that just inhabits different forms?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and does it takes the materials that are being worked on in a certain cycle and creates forms that it then inhabits?
Yeah, actually, the first globe is a unique situation. That first wave of monads, which is the most advanced, comes in and recapitulates. And we're going to be getting into this, but I might as well describe it now because it's, a lot of this stuff you have to repeat a number of times before you start getting a sense of what it is. So this first wave of monads come in and recapitulates from the previous round, recapitulates all the kingdoms in nature, right? And in so doing, sets the form aspect in place for those monadic waves that follow that first wave. You see what I mean? So it's not that they're at the level of for instance, a mineral kingdom, but they incarnate. You have to remember that that first globe is also a very tenuous substance, and so they can move. You know, one could assume they could transform their nature to the next kingdom much more easily, especially since it is a recapitulation. You know, it's just like when we recapitulate in each lifetime the physical, astral, and mental, our mental awareness in our early years of the incarnation. That's what they're doing as they enter globe one. So you could say they set up the kingdoms for those life waves that follow, right? Then they themselves, over the next rounds, enter into the human kingdom, and pave the way really for the other life waves to also follow in, because they set the form aspect so that when, especially at the second round, all the form aspect has been put in place. And now that first wave becomes human in the second round, or it's like a very quasi type human um, 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 physicality. It doesn't,
Right.
you know,
It's not solid, right?
It's not solid, but nonetheless, it sets that and acts as the leading edge for the other six life waves to come in and really inhabit the, you could almost call it like vibrational form aspects that were created uh, by this first wave, which literally conditions the globe. That globe A is a tabla rasa. You know, it's been wiped clean by pralaya, and so that first wave, the most advanced wave, has to set everything up again for the waves that follow.
So I guess my basic question is it the life waves of monads that create the forms, or are these forms created by those who are preparing the field for these monads to enter into?
Well, there is no other. It is that first life wave that does this, right? So no, they are the creators. You know, they're the petries, the lunar petries. That leading edge, that leading wave, are the lunar petries whose purpose is to reestablish the forms. And of course, it's on a higher spiral um, of uh, vibration compared to the previous round, right?
Mhm.
So that's one thing that's done in pralaya, is as all is absorbed, and there's a reconditioning that then manifests through that first wave of monads. And as usual, you have way many more questions.
Sure.
One has way many more questions than are answered, by these. It sounds like it's really detailed, but when you actually get into it, you realize how little is really being told us here.
Yeah, because obviously the lunar petries, they are preceded by other forms, et cetera, et cetera. So it seems like these successive waves of beings. And it makes me wonder, and again, it's just kind of spinning out my head a little bit here, but the human, we think of ourselves in our evolution now as being in one emanation of the monad through a specific lifetime. We're obviously not the monad, and yet we are the monad, and we're not the soul, but we are the soul. So
right.
It brings the question of the development. It seems like these forms have to be to a certain extent developed somehow, in order for the monads to participate in all of them. Otherwise, like you say, if they're the creators of them, they've got to be creating from some plan that preceded them.
Yeah, the question is it done consciously or unconsciously?
Mm-hmm.
I don't imagine that monads who are reestablishing, for instance, the mineral kingdom for a new round are consciously aware that they're doing that. They're not, because they're literally mineral at that stage, you know. And I don't imagine that they're fully conscious, but you know, we're not told, you know,
Right,
we're
right.
not told. So any scenario, you know, that you want to write is one possibility. You know, possibly they come through, they're totally conscious and they just are rebuilding a kind of pre-form, you know, um, a matrix of energies that will allow for those forms to come into being very consciously, and then they move. You know, it's like it's like housekeeping. You know, it's
Right.
like, and then they come up into the vegetable and do it there, and then the animal. So whether they're conscious or not at that point is really we're just not told much about this.
I might really be asking what comes first, the monad or the egg. So it's not going to be soluble.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
going to, anyway,
Well,
thank you.
what's really interesting is that the monad is ever present in all these kingdoms. It's not the kingdoms of nature that determine the identity. It's the monad, and the kingdom is just the form that they happen to be recapitulating at the time, and that's true for us too. You know, we're in the human kingdom, but we're not essentially human. We're, as you know, if anything, we're officially, or essentially fifth kingdom beings, you know. But does that even really tell the whole story? I doubt it. You know, I think the monadic identity is as close as we can get to, you know, actual identity. And then again, human beings go on to become planetary logi, and there are no longer human monads. So there is a progression eventually, even out of that realm of monadic consciousness, you know.
Well, it's clear that the human state that we exist in now is a very confused state because we don't really recognize our connection to these deeper emanating agencies.
Yeah.
And so with the glamour and the illusion of thinking we are these, I mean, we live in a world where so many people think that comes out of nothing, it goes to nothing, and they just exist as a separate unit. So there's obviously a lot of confusion here.
Yeah. What do they say? The only heresy is separation. Physical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so next up, let us follow then the order of their appearance on planet A in the first round. The time spaces between the appearances of these hierarchies on any one globe are so adjusted. Now, did I read this? I thought I read this. First, this person will be. Yeah, I think I read this.
Okay, you got a hand up, another hand up.
Yeah,
I think
okay.
you read it in the last round, I think.
Okay, who's the hand up?
Tom, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just what Robert wondered about the monad. So I have thought that we are the monad. That is what we are. And that monad is polarizing its consciousness on different levels of the universe. It polarizes itself as a stone, as a vegetable, then as an animal, then as a man, then as a superman. But what we are the monad polarized on these different states. So it's all this is what we are doing. We are expanding our consciousness to polarize ourselves ever higher levels, but we must never forget that we are the monad. Am I right?
Yeah, that's how I understand it as well. And that was well explained. Yeah. So you know what? Even though I read this, I'm going to do it again because this is particularly can be difficult. So let's just read this again. Let us follow then the order of their appearance on planet A. We're talking about now the order of these life waves, of their being life waves appearance on planet A. What is planet A? It's the first planet of a new round. So planet A in the first round. So what's happening here is This first life wave is initiating the new round. The time spaces between the appearance of these hierarchies on any one globe are so adjusted that when class 7, the last, appears on globe A, class 1, the first, has just passed on to globe B. Okay, and so on, step by step, all around the chain. Okay, so all around the chain, meaning the chain of globes. Okay, that's what he means here. She means here. He means her. Okay, you understand? So you have this, you just have this continuous movement from one globe to the next once that first life wave has established the habitat for the ones that follow it, right? So the sixth one or the seventh one enters that globe just as the first one is going to the next globe. And we can assume then that when that first wave moves on to globe C, that that at that point, the seventh, the laggards have just entered globe B, and so on all the way through. So the highest or first hierarchy passes on to globe B of a chain just before or just as the life wave of the lowest or seventh hierarchy transfers from the previous chain onto globe A of the new chain. This pattern continues around the chain of globes. Thus, just after the first class passes to globe C, the seventh class passes on to globe B. So I repeated myself, but hey, I think that works. So if you're confused, there are a lot of people, other people are also confused about this. This is a good time to get it right. If you think a question will help, please ask it, because there will be others who'll be wondering as well. So next up, could we get a reader, please? By the way, this chart appears in the middle of this page. This chart that we've been looking at, where you see the transfer from the lunar chain to the Earth chain, it appears on this page. I saw Robert's hand.
Yeah, Robert, go ahead and ask your question, and then Scott's got his hand up too.
Okay, relative to what Tom was saying about us, we are the monads, then the concept of laggards doesn't make a lot of sense, because it's not the monad that's the laggard, it's the form or lower density of the monad, that part of the monad. You know what I mean?
So you're saying you've never met a laggard monad?
Right. I never met a laggard I didn't like.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. It's like monads are one with spirit. So any laggardliness, I won't even try with that one, would have to do with the form aspect. For some reason, and this is a big mystery, for some reason, there are those who take much longer in their pilgrimage, in their journey away from out from the Father's house, so to speak, or the monadic plane. And that whole evolutional arc takes much longer. Now, what's suggested by this teaching is that it takes much longer, but never longer than one globe. They're never further than one globe behind, because what she says here is, what HPB says here is that, the seventh pass on to one globe just as the first is moving on to the next. So it suggests that and a globe is plenty long enough to be behind everyone else, but it suggests that that's the maximum distance between the first and the seventh waves. But yeah, it's quite mysterious. Like you say, you don't have laggard monads, so the essence is in no way different between the first and the seventh. But somehow in this pilgrimage, the difference manifests, the difference on this journey. And I'd never read an explanation of why that is, you know.
I think what you said is very important in terms of the distinction between monad and form. Obviously, soul is form, buddhi is form, atma is form. And
Yeah.
so we are like unconscious. I could accept unconscious monads, you know, in terms of Tom's model, or amnesiac monads or something, because we're still right in the middle of identifying with all these form levels.
Yeah. Yeah, and for some reason, there are those that progress more rapidly than others, you know.
Yeah, which makes sense, because you know, you can have different skills or different whatevers, but then that would make sense because it's the form that's giving the trouble to the monad, or determining
Right.
the rate, you know, of development.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? I
And
saw.
then Scott.
Yo.
Yeah, it's interesting, the diagram you have up there from your edition of the SD was changed in later editions. So in mine, that chart is reversed, which makes more sense.
Oh, yeah, it sure does.
The lunar chain should be on the left side and the earth chain on the right. And that's the way it is in the later editions.
Yeah, there you go. Well, here for the later edition. You know, I thought about this too, and I wondered if whoever did this chart was influenced by the right to left reading of the Oriental forms, you know, to where right to left is the way that they relate, you know.
Then our writing would and reading here would be from right to left as well, and it's not.
Exactly. So this one thing is reversed. But what I'm saying, I'm not saying this is right. I'm just saying I wonder if they were influenced, you know, in setting up this chart by the fact that they normally in their native language read that other way. Anyway, it's exactly right. It's quite peculiar. And you know, it should be changed. The problem with changes is that they have to be done from a place of very high consciousness, lest something is lost. But in this case, certainly nothing was lost. Anyone else? Any other thoughts?
Yes, Vivian says the continuity of consciousness is perhaps the issue.
Let's see. Let me think about that a minute. Well, continuity of consciousness is a function that is normally ascribed to the third initiation, which allows one to recall all one's existences. So it's only in the very last stages of samsara, or the great illusion, that one, I mean, literally the last stage, before one gains that continuity of consciousness. So most of the samsaric journey, which would be the impeding form life journey, would take place before that continuity of consciousness came into being. Anyone else?
No, but you needed a reader. Wait a minute. Tia says, on each globe are monads recapitulating on the cosmic physical plane for a Manvantara?
Okay, I'm just thinking about your comment. On not on each globe, at the beginning of each round on globe A, right? So there is a lesser recapitulation on the second globe, because you do have to inform the globe, but the forms have been set, and there's this. In other words, the forms are transferred from the first globe to the second, so the forms don't have to be re-established, you know, as they do when you're moving from one round to the next. That's where that first life wave has that extra work of going through all the kingdoms in order to set the form aspect for those that follow. When then you move on to globe B, well, the first wave has already been there, and those forms have been established. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but well, that's what I heard. Anyone else? Okay. Yep.
I think it goes to the whole question of us going through the fact that we're on the cosmic physical plane, and that we're
all of it happens on the cosmic physical.
And so until we come off of the cosmic physical plane, I think we're limited in our monadic expression, are we not?
Well, the monad itself, the home of the monad, you know, is on the cosmic physical plane, not even the first subplane, but the second subplane of the cosmic physical. So when you graduate from the cosmic physical plane, and I have no doubt that you will, Tia, you will be leaving this solar system behind. In other words, you will have moved beyond solar systemic consciousness. That happens way up there at the 9th initiation, you know, that you get into that level of consciousness, right? So even monadic consciousness, which is the 6th initiation, is on the cosmic physical plane. So all of this, yeah, all the schemes and all the rounds and all the globes happen on the cosmic physical plane, at least in this solar system. Okay, reader, please. Tom. Yeah, okay, good. Yes, Tom.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I changed the PC. Yes, about the monad is the most exciting thing in the universe and beyond. So I have thought that way, that the monad is potentially, it has everything, but not actually. And that's what we are now talking about when the monad visits these different nature kingdoms. It actualizes that potential consciousness, and that goes on and on and on. We call them initiations of consciousness expansion or anything, and it goes also beyond the cosmic physical level. So it's easier to think that
eventually
way. Yeah. So just when we always remember who we are, everything will be just right.
Yeah, it has a whole lot to do with moving beyond the grip of sequential time and three-dimensional space, because it's, when you are gripped by that, then you have the difference between the actual and the real, you could say, as you were describing. I'm using your words, that and DK talks about this. He says, the reality of a master, the truth is the word he uses. The truth of a master of wisdom is completely different than the truth, of an average person, because of where they're basing their truth. What truth is a relative concept, but you move progressively towards a more true truth. You're ever moving towards that. So you could say the monad on its own plane is an exemplar of the truth that the pilgrim that's sent forth for the redemption of the lesser kingdoms has to regain. And there's some, it's a redemptive journey, because you take all the lesser lives home with you, you could say. And in the language that HPP is using here, what you're doing in your service, through, once you move on to the evolutionary arc and you begin your path of service, but, even incarnating, you're serving the lesser lives that form, for instance, your body. You're already serving them. So you're actually working with or redeeming the lesser life waves, whatever life wave you belong to, then the life waves that come after you, those 7 life waves of monads, those are the ones you're working. It's not just like a race, and you're all disconnected. Toys R Us, your body is made up of that lesser wave, and through incarnation and then later in a more direct service, you're actually helping move those other life waves through their process.
Yeah, and I think Michael said sometime, well, which I liked very much. It's a matter of identification. So as your consciousness, your monads becomes more actual, it also widens its sphere of identification to include groups, and also deepens it from those lives that are not yet there. So
Right.
Yeah. And what I have been thinking, the basic question, who am I? And I have my hypothesis is that I am the highest point of tension that I can reach, and just that I'm not able to reach. There am I. That's my monad consciousness right now.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a seeker to me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay.
And Robert's got his hand up.
Yeah, Robert.
Well, I think that point you were making earlier about the distinction between form and monad. Monad itself is form. In terms of the cosmic whole, the monad is just a kind of like a cell from the second etheric subplane of the physical. So we're talking about, in terms of who we are the absolute. We're just, we're the absolute on a journey of ignorance to kind of clear away the fog and the clouds.
Speak for yourself, Robert.
But to learn from this journey, obviously that is that's the purpose of it. I guess. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, you extend it up to that level, and you're right. We're the life aspect. Ultimate identification. The monad is a temporary form of ultimate identification. And that's because in that sentence you have both temporary and ultimate, which it's an oxymoron, but nonetheless that's how it is.
Well, it's relative. Like it's ultimate for that which is below it, but it's actually a limited identification.
It's a limited identification, but it's
the planes that are above it on a cosmic level. So, I mean, I don't think we're going to accomplish this by next month. I think it's going to take some time.
And I think it's also relevant to the human kingdom, that it's an ultimate identification for the human kingdom. Once you enter other kingdoms, something else takes its place.
Right.
Obviously the monad of a solar logos is not on the monadic plane of the cosmic physical plane.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
So there's, but one would have to believe that ultimate self, it is itself, once we regain the Father's home, so to speak, the sixth initiation, that it itself continues to move onto the higher planes through the higher initiations. Okay, let's go ahead and get a reader, please.
Okay, Karen, can you read that for us, please?
Again, in the 7th round on the lunar chain, when class 7, the last, quits globe A, that globe, instead of falling asleep as it had done in previous rounds, begins to die, to go into its planetary pralaya. And in dying, it transfers successively, as just said, its principles, or life elements and energy, etc., one after the other to a new Laya center, which commences the formation of globe A of the Earth chain. A similar process takes place for each of the globes of the lunar chain, one after the other, each forming a fresh globe of the Earth chain. Our moon was the fourth globe of the series and was on the same plane of perception as our Earth. But globe A of the lunar chain is not fully dead till the first monads of the first class have passed from globe G or Z, the last of the lunar chain, into the nirvana which awaits them between the two chains. And similarly for all the other globes as stated, each giving birth to the corresponding globe of the Earth chain.
Okay. It doesn't just roll off the tongue, does it, in terms of understanding? But now we've kind of shifted up to the life of a globe instead of the progression of the life of a monad, right? Because as long as you're within a chain, one chain, you're using the same 7 globes, and those lives house the 7 monadic waves, or what he calls classes here, right? But when you shift to the next chain, then you're going to be in a whole new set of 7 globes. And as a result, then you get this teaching. So we'll take it step by step. So first up, again, in the 7th round on the lunar chain, so we're talking about the last round, the last time around the 7 globes on the lunar chain over here, when class 7, the last, quits globe A, right here, when the last of these quit, that globe, instead of falling asleep, which would be what it does normally when you're just moving from one globe to the next during a chain. But here, when you're passing from one chain to the next, instead of falling asleep, as it had done in previous rounds, begins to die to go into its planetary pralaya. Okay, a distinction there. So HPB here makes a distinction between falling asleep or just going into a stasis and going into its planetary pralaya. Falling asleep suggests that the planet is more or less frozen in situ until it wakes up for the next round, right? Because it's the same 7 planets round after round. Whereas planetary pralaya suggests the reconditioning necessary for the globe to transfer its life principles to the next chain. Hence the idea of a death, because the form is discarded. Okay, so let's take a look at the footnote referenced by the phrase planetary pralaya. Here you have the phrase, to go into its planetary pralaya. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, let me read what Tia's comment is, and then Tia, if you'll read that for us. Her comment is, it's interesting that the period between 2 chains is called nirvana. Is that planetary pralaya?
No, pralaya. In between 2 chains is called, did she call it nirvana here?
Yes.
Let's go back here and look. Do you see nirvana in here? Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is. It's a nirvana which awaits between 2 chains. Well, that's a state of non-physical consciousness. Nirvana is a description of the stage of consciousness, and compared to pralaya, which is the references the non-physicality of it. I would say that's the difference between the two. You're having nirvana during pralaya, right? Okay, so can we get a reader? Oh yeah, Tia, you're going to read?
Yes, thank you, Francis.
Yeah.
Occultism divides the periods of rest, pralaya, into several kinds. There is the individual pralaya of each globe, as humanity and life pass on to the next. 7 minor pralayas in each round. The planetary pralaya, when 7 rounds are completed. The solar pralaya, when the whole system is at an end. And finally, the universal Maha or Brahma pralaya at the close of the age of Brahma. These are the 3 chief pralayas or destruction periods. There are many other minor ones, but with these we are not concerned at present.
Okay, so we're talking about the planetary pralaya when you're moving from one chain to the next. That's this one here, planetary pralaya. When 7 rounds are completed, that's the one we're reading about now, and she covers all the pralayas. So first, occultism is divided into periods of rest, pralaya, into 7 kinds. There is the individual pralaya of each globe as humanity and life passes to the next globe. 7 minor pralayas in each round. So during one round, each of the 7 globes experiences what she calls an individual pralaya. This is the lesser pralaya that HPB describes as a planet falling asleep, quote, because it doesn't dissolve. It's just awaiting the next round. And we have some reading on this. And this is an illustration of the movement, right? As you move from one globe, in this case, in our Earth chain, the Earth globe to the Mercury globe, then you have this, what she calls here an individual pralaya, right? And could we get it? This is DK's take on these, on the pralaya between 2 globes. Reader, please.
Rudy, can you read that for us, please?
Between the 2 globes in a chain, this covers the period of abstraction of the seeds of all life and its transference from one sphere to another. The seed Manu of a globe gathers all the life forces into himself, as does the Logos at the close of a system, and as also transpires at the close of the chain and holds them quiescent in his aura. This covers the period of a Manvantara, or of one day of Brahma.
So we get a little more information here. He brings in the idea of a seed Manu, right? Who's this conscious entity who gathers the seeds, the life force into himself. Okay, and so the next comment is the planetary pralaya, when 7 rounds are completed. So we're just moving through the levels of pralaya. This marks the period between 2 chains. Let's continue with DK's tabulation. Can we get a reader for this part? So now you have the shift, see, from one chain, this on the left here, which in this case is the 3rd chain, called alternately the Moon chain and the Saturn chain, and the Earth chain, where you have this intermediate Laya center, but you're actually moving on to a new physical planet. You know, that's why the Moon is the globe D, or the 4th globe of the 3rd chain, and the Earth is the 4th globe. So that's our one example of how this works, right? A reader, please, between 2 chains.
Cindy, can you read that for us, please?
Yes, between 2 chains. This covers the period of a Mahamanvantara, or of 1 year of Brahma. There are many ways of arriving at the greater cycles, but there is no need to confuse with the intricacies of figures. The 10 Prajapatas or Rishis, or the 10 planetary logoi, manifest through their 10 schemes in time and space, the hour of their appearing differing. Each likewise manifests, as does the logos, through a septenate and a triad, making again a 10 of perfection.
Thank you. So we get a little more teaching here. The 7 relates to the that governed by the third principle, you know, and the physical realm. Then 2 of the remaining 3 are synthesizing, and then there's one final whole synthesis that represents the entire chain, right? So he moves it from 7 to 10, but don't be dismayed. The other 3 are non-physical. They have more to do with this pralaic level. Okay. The septonate represents the manifest globes, the triad, the 3 principles of spirit, soul, and matter that inform the 7 globes. There's an amusing exchange in the Secret Doctrine dialogues between HPB and the Kitely brothers on this particular subject. I found it amusing anyway. Can we get a reader, please?
Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Oh, goody.
Mr. A. Kitely, does the planetary spirit in charge of a globe go into Pralaya, or his globe when his globe enters Pralaya? Madam Blavatsky, the planetary spirits go into Pralaya at the end of the 7th round, not after every one of the rounds, because he is in charge of the globe and has to watch the workings of the laws, even during the status quo condition of the globe when it goes into its time of rest. That is to say, during its interplanetary Pralaya. I explain everything in the Secret Doctrine, and this is explained somewhere there. The chairman, I don't remember it. Mr. B. Knightley, I don't think you put it in print. Madam Blavatsky, maybe. Then they must have been left it out, or perhaps it is the 3rd or 4th volume. I remember I have written it. Mr. A. Kitely, well then, if anything is missed out of the Secret Doctrine, we will say it's in the 3rd volume. Madam Blavatsky, no, really, I should show it to you. It's in the 3rd volume. I know I have written it.
So it just shows, you know, her reality on the inner planes of what she has written compared to what she's actually written. You know, it'd be nice to have everything, all those other instances of information that she thought she'd written, right? See, this whole talks with students happened after the publication of the Secret Doctrine, really in the last year of her life, right? So kind of interesting. Okay. Next, the solar pralaya, when the whole system is at an end. Let's again continue the tabulation laid out by DK. Can we get a reader, please?
Janet, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Again, in the solar system itself, similar action will eventuate at the close of the Mahamantara. The logos will withdraw within himself, abstracting his 3 major principles, his body of manifestation, the sun, and the 7 sacred planets, all existing in etheric matter. Will withdraw from objectivity and become obscure. From the usual physical standpoint, the light of the system will go out. This will be succeeded by a gradual inbreathing until he shall have gathered all unto himself. The etheric will cease to exist, and the web will be no more. Full consciousness will be achieved. And in the moment of achievement, existence or entified manifestation will cease. Between the 2 solar systems, this covers the period of 100 years of Brahma. And through the study of planetary cycles, comprehension of these greater cycles may come. Complication comes to the student nonetheless in the fact that the 2 of the scheme cover their cyclic periods in 5 rounds, while others have 7. One scheme has but 3 rounds, but a mystery is hidden here. On the inner round of one planet has 9 cycles to run before the purpose of the Lord is completed.
So much for this ubiquitous
Really?
centenary idea. Suddenly, if you've survived 744 pages, you find out that, there are other planets with different numbers of rounds. That was a real eyebrow raiser for me. Thank you. Okay, and next and finally, the universal Maha or Brahma Pralaya at the close of the age of Brahma. So for insight into this universal Maha Pralaya, which includes cessation of all existence throughout the universe, we have to go all the way back to stanza 1 because DK, for the most part, doesn't go there. He doesn't talk in terms of universals. He talks mostly, he goes beyond the solar system, but all is related to the solar logos, even when it's when he does move beyond the solar system. So, but in HPB's world, there is the absolute, that concept of the absolute, of course, which DK recognizes. So we have to go all the way back to stanza 1. The 8th verse of this stanza epitomizes this level of pralaya. Alone, the one form of existence stretched boundless, infinite, causeless in dreamless sleep, and life pulsated unconscious in universal space throughout that all presence. And finally, these are the 3 chief pralayas or destruction periods. There are many other minor ones, but with these, we are not concerned at present. DK describes these lesser pralayas in the early pages of TCF. Can we get a reader, please?
Kira, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. The beginning of, okay, there it goes. Man, the indwelling thinker, passes at night from out of his etheric ring past not and functions elsewhere. Therefore, under the law, the planetary logos likewise can pass his ring past not as at stated seasons, which correspond in the planet to the hours of man's temporary repose or pralaya. The solar logos likewise does the same during stated cycles, which are not the cycles succeeding those which we term solar pralaya, but lesser cycles, succeeding the days of Brahma, or periods of lesser activity, periodically viewed.
So he doesn't go into detail about these lesser pralayas. There are also planetary pralayas that are that take place more frequently than even the subraces. So it's not all is written or described, but we have a sense of the main series of pralayas. And that's going to do it for today, folks. Yeah, Scott. We'll end with Scott's.
Well, maybe it's an ending, maybe it's a beginning. Going back to the the chart you showed of the wave moving from one chain to another.
One chain.
That the moon. The moon.
Did I show a chart?
Yeah, you did a chart. There was a. Yeah, keep going back here. Back. It's back a ways. That one right there. 3rd chain listed as Saturn, but we call it the moon chain.
I know it's unreconciled.
That's very strange.
It is. This is, if I was to click on this, you've seen this Earth scheme chart. These are just 2 details of the Earth scheme chart, right? So these are the words that appear in TCF's labeling of the Earth scheme. The Saturn chain. Now, you can see the connection. They're both very much form-based, but even decay refers in other parts to a moon chain. But I haven't done enough reading to reconcile these two terms. And I did give it a short try. And I did a search to see if I could find a description of, what the difference is. But good eye. You,
I just
yeah,
wonder, it's a blind, it would
blind.
seem to be calling it the moon chain, because we can relate to that. If I call it the moon is from the Saturn chain, we're going to go, that's what it's showing. What's going on here?
Exactly. And I would think the more esoteric title would be the Saturn chain, yeah. So, in which we have the moon, right? So there you have it.
Does the moon have its own chain? Really? It's not a planet.
Yeah, see, that's it. Yeah, exactly. That, if anything, I would say most of all, that suggests that it's just a title that we're giving to the Saturn chain. The fact that it's called the moon chain. Why would it be called the moon chain? So interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, if you look at this geometry, I'm fascinated by this geometry. With the fourth chain, you could see very definitely we have a square here that describes the nature of four, the imprisoning cube kind of thing, where the three is always abstraction. It's the inner planets, right? But here, we have the 6-pointed star, and you can see this, since Saturn is a third-rate planet, and the number 3 does apply, to this, because you have this triangular formation, double triangle, basically, right? But it doesn't have any, the geometry has nothing to do with what you would imagine the moon to be, the moon seems like it would have this kind of geometry, the same as the Earth, but even more form-based. Like, for instance, the 3 planets in the middle wouldn't even be there, But anyway, good point, Scott. Yeah. It's one of the differences between HPB and DK Theosophy. Okay, well, we have one more webinar before the conference, and that will occur on the 28th, on a Friday, the 28th. That's Treatise on Cosmic Fire. And then we're taking a break. But actually, the only webinar that we miss is the Secret Teachings of All Ages. I was going to try to do it before, but I just couldn't get it done. So we'll just have to miss that one webinar, Secret Teachings of All Ages. But the Secret Doctrine, which occurs on the 3rd Sunday, will be available as usual, right? Also, the TCF, I guess I didn't check the calendar for the 2nd Sunday. That probably won't work, because my guess is that's the day the conference ends. Anyway, pretty much we didn't lose webinars by going into the conference.
Okay.
But
yeah, we did. We're losing the next Cosmic Fire. So you don't have any webinars before the conference?
Yes, I do. On the 28th.
The 28th of April?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
That's a Friday. That's the 4th Friday, and that one's intact. But then we go into the conference period, and we lose. Do you have a calendar up in front of you?
Sort of. It's dark here. We're in the middle of a storm. Okay, what is it you want to know?
Well, I'll just go there. I'm not shy. Let me get over here. let's see here. So I know you guys can't see all of this, but so in May, Sunday, which is the, let me go to the monthly view. Okay.
21 May will be
Yeah,
the next.
the second Sunday is, here, I'll move this over so you can see what I'm looking at. The second Sunday is the 14th. That's the last day of the conference. So that means that treatise on cosmic fire is canceled, right? But not the fourth one. The 28th will come back in, right? Of May for that. Okay, so we missed the secret teachings of all ages and the first treatise on cosmic fire, it looks like. Yeah. Okay. It's, when in doubt, I should say, not if in doubt, but when in doubt, just go to morefederation.com and check it out. Check out the schedule. It's always available there, so you can find out what's going on. All right. Anyone else? Any last words? I really do hope you participate in the conference this year. I think it's going to be a real good one. BL and I are both speaking at both the Rayology pre-conference and the astrology conference, and I think we're both giving 2 presentations on the Rayology and 1 presentation on the astrology. Is that right, BL?
I think I'm doing 3 on rayology. My mind is fuzz at this point, but
we'll be speaking a lot along with some other good speakers. And so, yeah, jump in, join us. I think it's going to be a great conference. And that starts in the first week of May, towards the end of the first week of May. I don't know exactly. You have to check.
right. The whole conference is from the 2nd of May to the 14th of May. There's going to be the ceremonial pre-conference workshop. There's going to be a Wesak ceremony. Then there's going to be the rayology pre-conference seminar.
When does that start?
That starts the 6th and 7th for the rayology.
Yeah.
And then the 8th and 9th will be the esoteric astrology pre-workshop. So then the main conference looks like will start on the 10th. It may be the evening of the 9th. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's usually the way it goes. And the rayology and the astrology conferences are more linked this year than usual because the subject of our rayology, especially the second day, is the rayology of the planets. And so we really get into the rayological aspects of all the planets, which is, that's an aspect of rayology that's quite important. So, okay, that'll do it. Thank you all.